The story does not begin with a crime. It begins with access. Access to rooms most people never enter, to phones that are never answered by strangers, to doors that open not because of who is knocking, but because of who is expected. According to records, Jeffrey Epstein moved through these spaces with unusual ease, not as a celebrity in the traditional sense, but as a figure whose presence raised few questions and generated fewer refusals. Reports suggest that his influence was not loud or visible. It was quiet, procedural, and often invisible, embedded in systems designed to protect reputation and power. In public documents, Epstein was described as a financier. The description appears frequently, yet details are sparse. Court filings and financial disclosures indicate that his wealth was substantial, but its precise sources were rarely clarified. This lack of clarity did not slow his ascent. Instead, it seemed to accompany it. According to people who later spoke on record, ambiguity itself became a shield. When origins are unclear, scrutiny often softens. When scrutiny softens, influence expands. Influence does not announce itself. It accumulates. It appears in invitations extended and returned, in phone calls answered late at night, in meetings that are never written down. Documents indicate that Epstein cultivated relationships across politics, business, academia, and media. The range of these connections has been widely reported, but the nature of the relationships remains unevenly documented. Some were casual, some were professional. Some, according to later testimony, carried expectations that were never written, only understood. According to flight logs and visitor records, Epstein's private aircraft traveled frequently. The names associated with these journeys have drawn intense attention. Yet documents also show that such records are incomplete, sometimes contradictory, sometimes missing altogether. In the gaps between what is recorded and what is absent, narratives form. Some are supported by evidence, others are not. The challenge, according to investigators, has always been separating documented fact from implication, and implication from assumption. Reports suggest that Epstein understood this distinction well. Influence, in this context, was not about overt control. It was about shaping what could be proven and what could not. When evidence depends on records, and records can be limited, delayed, or sealed, truth becomes negotiable. According to legal experts, this is not unique to Epstein's case, but his situation illustrates the dynamic with unusual clarity. When allegations first emerged publicly, they were met with skepticism. According to contemporary news coverage, some outlets framed the accusations as unverified claims, emphasizing uncertainty over substance. Legal filings indicate that early complaints faced procedural obstacles, jurisdictional disputes, and questions of credibility. These barriers were not extraordinary in isolation. Together, they created delay. Delay, according to records, proved decisive. Influence also operates through perception. Documents indicate that Epstein donated to institutions that conferred legitimacy. Universities accepted funding. Foundations listed his name among benefactors. These associations, once established, functioned as signals. According to internal communications later released, some organizations expressed concern privately while maintaining relationships publicly. The appearance of respectability, according to analysts, can be as powerful as its reality. Silence played a role as well. Reports suggest that individuals who questioned Epstein's behavior often encountered subtle discouragement rather than direct threats. According to testimony, concerns were redirected, minimized, or deferred. In some cases, complainants were advised that pursuing the matter would be difficult, costly, or reputationally damaging. Such advice, when repeated, shapes behavior. It teaches restraint. It narrows the field of voices willing to speak. Court documents show that when legal action was taken, it moved slowly. Negotiations occurred largely out of public view. According to records, agreements were reached that limited exposure and reduced consequences. The rationale was often procedural efficiency. The effect, according to critics, was containment. Information was compartmentalized. Responsibility was localized. Broader questions remained unanswered. Media coverage followed a similar pattern. Initial reports appeared, then faded. According to newsroom accounts, editors weighed the complexity of the story against audience fatigue and legal risk. Influence, in this context, did not require direct intervention. The mere possibility of litigation or loss of access was often sufficient. Stories were shortened. Follow-ups were postponed. The narrative lost momentum. As years passed, Epstein's public profile diminished while his private activities continued. According to property records, his residences expanded in size and security. According to neighbors interviewed later, privacy was rigorously maintained. Staff turnover was high. Non-disclosure agreements were common. Each of these elements, taken alone, is not unusual among wealthy individuals. Together, they formed a closed system. Influence within such a system becomes self-reinforcing. According to sociologists, once a network reaches a certain density, external scrutiny becomes less effective. Information circulates internally, norms stabilize, and deviations are corrected quietly. In Epstein's case, documents indicate that this network extended across national borders, complicating jurisdiction and oversight. When renewed reporting brought the case back into public view, the reaction was markedly different. According to later coverage, earlier decisions were re-examined. Past silence was questioned. Institutions issued statements distancing themselves from prior associations. Some returned donations. Others acknowledged errors in judgment. Yet records show that these actions occurred after scrutiny intensified, not before. This sequence raises a central question. How does influence alter the path of truth? According to analysts, truth is not only a matter of facts, but of timing, emphasis, and amplification. Facts that emerge too early may be dismissed. Facts that emerge too late may be reframed. Influence determines which phase prevails. Legal scholars point to the role of settlements and sealed records. According to court procedures, such mechanisms are designed to resolve disputes efficiently. In practice, they can also limit public understanding. Documents indicate that key details in Epstein-related cases remained inaccessible for years. When records are sealed, narratives fill the void. Victims' accounts, when they did surface, followed a consistent pattern. According to testimony, they described environments of control and isolation. They described being told that powerful people were involved, that resistance would be futile. Whether or not such statements were accurate in every instance, their effect was clear. They shaped perception. Perception shaped behavior. Influence also affected how institutions responded. According to internal reviews, some organizations lacked clear protocols for addressing allegations involving donors or affiliates. Decisions were made ad hoc, often balancing ethical concerns against financial or reputational considerations. In these moments, influence does not dictate outcomes directly. It frames the options. The concept of rewriting truth does not imply fabrication alone. It includes omission, delay, and selective emphasis. According to media studies research, stories that lack continuous reinforcement tend to fade from public consciousness. Epstein's case demonstrates how this fading can occur even when underlying issues remain unresolved. When law enforcement renewed its investigation, documents indicate a more assertive approach. Subpoenas were issued, testimony was gathered, public interest surged. Yet even then, influence persisted in subtle ways. According to legal observers, the complexity of the case, combined with its history, created uncertainty about scope and responsibility. The sudden end of Epstein's life introduced a new dimension. Official findings addressed immediate circumstances. At the same time, records show that broader questions multiplied. How much information remained undisclosed? How many decisions had been shaped by influence rather than evidence? These questions, by their nature, resist definitive answers. In the aftermath, attention turned to systems rather than individuals. According to policy analysts, the case exposed weaknesses in oversight, transparency, and accountability. Influence thrives where processes are opaque. It diminishes where records are accessible and decisions are documented. Yet documents also suggest that reform is uneven. Some changes were proposed, some implemented, others stalled. Influence, after all, does not disappear with one case. It adapts. It learns. It finds new pathways. The Epstein files, as they are often called, represent more than a collection of documents. They illustrate a pattern. According to records, truth, in this context, was not erased. It was reshaped, delayed, fragmented. Each fragment carried weight, but rarely enough to stand alone. For those who study power, the lesson is not about a single figure. It is about mechanisms. How access becomes authority. How authority becomes insulation. How insulation allows narratives to be managed rather than confronted. According to investigative journalists, the challenge going forward is persistence. Influence relies on exhaustion. It waits for attention to move elsewhere. It counts on complexity to deter inquiry. The only counterweight is sustained scrutiny, supported by records and accountability. As time passes, memories fade, but documents remain. According to archivists, the significance of records often increases with distance. Patterns become clearer. Connections emerge. What once appeared isolated may reveal structure. The question that remains is not whether influence rewrote truth, but how often this occurs without notice. Epstein's case brought the process into partial view. It showed how easily narratives can be guided, softened, or postponed when power operates quietly. In the end, the story is unresolved. According to records, many questions remain open, not because answers do not exist, but because access to them has been uneven. Influence does not always deny truth. Sometimes it simply decides when and how it will be seen.